Hello, my name's Tom Cahill. It's Tuesday, the 12th of August 2014. I want to do a video to continue on from the one that I did previously about a lady who was working for TfL, Transport for London, when I was working there 6 or 7 years ago, who seemed to be getting inexplicably upward all the time. It made no sense. Well, it made a lot of sense when you look back at it, but at the time it made no sense on sort of first principle terms. And there's something obviously very odd about it. Not only was she proven to be very incompetent on a number of occasions, which I was personally involved with, and this is with her clearly being given a lot of protection, or seeming to be. So if she's overtly doing things wrong when you hardly have any exposure to anything she does, because she's got a wall of people to protect her, then she obviously must be really quite bad. And then on top of the incompetence that I witnessed, it would seem she was also very unpopular. So if you've got someone who's very unpopular, universally unpopular almost, or pretty much, apart from sucks who were pretending, who she'd got in as a consultant, and they wouldn't obviously pretend they liked her, but no one else would. It all seemed very strange. So this lady was called Dana Skelley, and everybody was saying, "Oh no, she'll be the boss." It just seems that they want to be the boss for some reason. No one knows, but they just seem to want to make her the boss. Now, when somebody contacted me about a week ago about a job, and I realised that this job was obviously at Transport for London, it just made me think about it again. And I'd stored it away in my head because there had been other dodgy occurrences at TfL, which I'll just give you a quick background. There's a guy called Bob Kiley who was the boss of all of TfL. This lady's just head of surface transport, so that's sort of as good as the same thing. She's just not in charge of the underground. But Bob Kiley was taken on board, and a few years later they did the 7/7 false flag attacks, didn't they? So Bob Kiley's previous credentials were working for the CIA. So with him, I mean, it was even more blatant. Now, but you see, the way things work in your mind is sometimes you don't put things together, because I knew that the government were trying to blow the underground up the day that I was on it, and I heard the announcements about the power surge, so I just got off. I knew immediately. I knew immediately. I didn't need anyone to tell me. I didn't even need to. I mean, I didn't know there was going to be bombs, but I thought that's what it was going to be. So if there hadn't been bombs, it wouldn't have meant I was wrong. It would have just meant that, I would have thought maybe they'd called them off or something, But either way, it was obviously a very unusual thing to say. I knew it was a code for people who were in the know to get out, and so I got out. But the point is, I hadn't been told it's code. It's just common sense and experience, and of course things like knowledge of Operation Gladio and things like that. But you see, the thing is, when I left the underground, I didn't then immediately think, "Oh, that's why Bob Kiley's in charge." But I did know he was in the CIA. Now, there's lots of comparisons between Dana Skelley and Bob Kiley. Now, I'm not saying this Dana Skelley's a drunk. I really wouldn't know if she was or not. The point was, Bob Kiley, from numerous accounts, was so drunk the entire time at TfL, whilst pioneering a policy of getting rid of anybody who had the slightest, minute amount of blood in their, booze in their blood. He was, pioneering this get rid of zero tolerance to drink, and he literally couldn't even get up out of his desk most of the time, apparently. And the only way they could get him up for meetings, because he'd be very abusive, he'd start calling people names and shouting at them and telling them he's going to end them and stuff, is they'd have to phone his mate Charlie, I hear, up in the CIA, and he'd give him a phone, and they go, "Oh, it's Charlie. Charlie wants to speak to you." Charlie could sort of sober him up by speaking to him a bit. He'd always speak to Charlie about, non-transport related things, I would imagine. I hope that's Charlie wasn't phoning up to ask about how the buses were running, because he wouldn't have known, because he'd be too drunk, wouldn't he? But you see, again, totally incompetent, totally compromised, had absolutely no use, and then he's been put in place, and then he presumably stage managed the 7/7 bombings, and because he was pissed up, we know that didn't go very well, because the Pakistanis escaped, didn't they, and they had to shoot them. So that thing really didn't go according to plan. But of course, maybe you can't blame him, because was he to know if he was drunk all the time that the trains getting them to Luton wouldn't necessarily turn up on time. So you see, there are these comparisons. If you see someone who's been promoted, who's got no skill whatsoever, and people don't like, and they're very abusive and nasty all the time, that kind of arrogance can only come from being a protected person. So, I mean, a lot of people would say, well, I mean, I don't know anything about Bob Kiley's background. I don't even know. I wouldn't even know if I fell over him. I don't even know if he's still alive. But the point is that one would have to assume that he's either a Freemason or a Jew. Otherwise, there's no way he'd get promoted in that circumstance. Or maybe he's highly compromised, like he's provided children to members of Parliament or the royal family or some other important people. He's in some club. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Masons. It can be another club. You don't actually have to be a Jew. You just be in their little club, and you can be protected. But you see, the thing with Darla Skelley, I never thought, oh, she's a Jew, that's why she's getting promoted. When I was there, I just definitely didn't think about that. It wasn't really something I'd be aware of. I knew that Jews did get promoted because they're Jews, and they do like obviously look after their own and stuff like that. But I also wasn't really aware of. I knew there was different sects, but I didn't really understand how they all went together. And I still don't, to be honest with you. But the thing I do know, that people who do that stuff with their hands when they're talking, like that is a sign that, they're in the Jew squad. Whatever a Jew is, I don't even really know what the definition is. Let's just say they're Canaanites. Eustace Mullins would call them Canaanites, and I'd say he knows a lot more about them than me. And I think a lot of them do think they're Canaanites, so in some ways that could be a common ground. But all those horrible MPs who, are all, looking at getting the chop for being paedophiles and, just general perverts. I don't think a single one of them looks like they have a normal family life with a normal fat. They're not normal people, are they? Like Gove's the most creepy one. Miliband's very creepy. Every single one of them, without exceptions, are Jew. And then you've got all the Labour ones who are trying to bring paedophilia in and legalise it. All Jews. See, again, I wouldn't have even known they were Jews, but you start seeing them do the hands. I don't know if they all do that, but if you actually type half of these MPs in now, these cabinet ministers in, you'll see and put a picture of them up. They will actually be doing the dodgy hand signs where they're just poking their fingers out in all directions. Very unnatural. Looks evil. So why would you do it? Why would you do something that looks unnatural and evil when you're trying to persuade people that you're good? What it is I think it's this sort of Canaanite faction, let's call them. They're showing their hand now, and they just don't care who sees it. That's what it is. They're that confident. And I think they probably, with the sickness, that they're all up to, they probably think it gives them magic powers. And I mean, definitely there would be an element of magic, wouldn't there, the fact that you're controlling the will of the people around you, because they're going along with the fact that you're so horribly obnoxious all the time. Now, as I said, with this Darla Skelley, she was very obnoxious all the time. She wasn't like your typical sort of psycho, schizophrenic type person who pretended to be nice, then was very backstabbing and cheating. I think she does all that anyway, but she never pretended to be nice. She just didn't bother. And Bob Kiley, from what I hear, he didn't bother trying to be nice either. Right, so both of these people have administered or been in charge, let's say, in a very conservative manner, in a very ridiculously naive manner. They've been in charge when very, very dodgy things have happened on the network. And they've been in charge of them. Now, with Bob Kiley, because he was the top of TfL, there's technically somebody who'd be in charge of the underground underneath him. So the buck would stop with him, but, if you're just getting pissed up in your office the whole time, you can quite easily deny it. Now, of course, if you've got CIA backing and all that stuff, there'd probably be contracts and deals and stuff that would prove, the people putting in the security systems of various types and that, they'd probably be linked to him, I'd imagine. But again, it's all quite circumstantial. I mean, anyone with a fully functioning brain knows why they put someone, if the CIA gets put in charge of your underground and it gets blown up to start a war the CIA want to start, then obviously it's not very hard to work out. But with Darla Skelley, it's completely different, right? So, I don't know anything that Bob Kiley did that was particularly stupid. I just knew he was pissed the whole time. That's all I know. So I don't know about numerous. I wouldn't know him if I fell over him. I never did any work for him. I never even did any work for him. For anyone who did any work for someone who did any work for him, it was complete nothing really to do with me. I just knew he was the boss. Now, the thing that's very different was with Dana. I actually had, as I explained in the other video, there's 3 incidences of things that were very suspicious that happened around her. That I was actually involved with. I was the person sort of chasing the information that seemed to be getting blocked. But I didn't necessarily realise it was all to do with her at the time. But again, as I said, there was 3 particular instances, and one of them had pretty much a smoking gun attached to it, which I explain in the message, but I'll quickly go over them again. We were looking for emails for a claim that she'd caused. and they were her emails, and she didn't want to hand them over, it would seem, because people were talking about getting outside legal counsel to whether we could get her emails about her work at work. Then there was another incident on the same subject where all of everybody's emails just disappeared off the system. They said you can't get them back, which is absolute nonsense, because of course you can get them back. And I mean, you know, there's no guarantee that's related, but the whole point is it's a bit convenient because it happened after she'd refused, or she never refused to me, but somebody said no, she doesn't want that. They're asking her to get legal counsel to see if she can hand them over. I mean, that's nonsense. Of course she can hand them over. They're her work. She's doing her work, or she's refusing to give the work she's done at work over for me. It's ridiculous. And then the third thing was the contracts and procurement department, who had the contract that pertained to the consultancy agreement that the claim pertained to. They apparently lost the contract. This is a 50-strong department who were pretty much in charge of 2 contracts, and they apparently lost one of them. Not in a million years. But you see, at the time, you don't realise. Sometimes these things only click in later. Because, I mean, some of the people who managed that department did seem pretty incompetent, but then I suspect rather it's just ridiculous. It's too ridiculously incompetent, even for them. But the whole point is, it's a lot more believable if you think, well, yeah, but they were quite old, and probably it's in their interest to just play stupid and just not hand over some contracts. They've probably been threatened, aren't they? You know, or they've got some kind of pressure put on them. That'd be just me surmising. But anyway, so that's the end of that, and I've made that point hopefully well enough. I worked for TfL for 2 years, about 6 or 7 years ago. Right now, and I was a contractor. So anyway, I was a quantity surveyor. Now, the thing is, this Woolwich Hoax, right? When I first heard about the Woolwich Hoax, when this policeman who I've been dealing with, and it wasn't he's not a policeman who's chasing after me or something. He's a policeman who I have a common interest in something in, and he was phoning me up about it, I believe, or maybe I phoned him. I forget who phoned who, but the point is we had been speaking quite a bit at that time, so it wasn't unusual to get a call from him, and it wasn't unusual for me to call him. You know, and we got on quite well. But the point is, occasionally he would say things like, you'd ask him about something that was happening because he was a Met policeman, and he would come back with something, and you'd think, no, that doesn't sound quite right. And often he'd say, oh, it's the police, somebody I know's told me it, and I'm thinking, well, you know, and then afterwards it turned out that thing wasn't true. So he was actually spreading on disinformation, which I believe he'd been told as disinformation to trick him. So this wasn't the first time he'd said things to me which I know were wrong, and I know they were wrong because, well, at the time I sort of thought they sounded a bit off, and then it turned out that wasn't true. But he was being, you know, in his head he thought he knew, but somebody's obviously lied to him. Someone who he knows, because I don't think he's a particularly disingenuous person. He wouldn't have lied to me, I don't think, you know, over something like that. But anyway, so I called this guy up, or he called me, and he sort of said, oh, you wouldn't believe it, in South London there's these people going around chopping people's heads off. And I was like, no, so-and-so, no, they're not. That's bollocks. And he's like, no, they are. My colleague told me. I'm like, look, no, they're not. Anyway, like, look, shit. And I was like, you know, what have I told you about listening to what policemen tell you? You know, they're making a fool of you. So, of course, 2 or 3 days later, we realised no one's head was getting cut off, so he was getting lied to. Right, so anyway. But the point is, that's how I first found out about it. So just like when I first heard about the 7/7 bombings with the power surges, I knew what it was. Seconds later, I've reacted on the basis of the fact I know it's a state-sponsored bit of bullshit. Or within the instance of 7/7, I thought, yeah, it'll be the government blowing up the trains like the Blarney bombings. So that's my background on it. Right now, so I've explained, you've got these people who are promoted into position, or it would appear, to carry out terrorism events. And the thing with these terrorism events is they're not in the interest of England. They're not in the interest. There's no wars that we've gone in off the back of them that have really benefited us. It's not like someone like the Falklands War. People say, oh, well, it benefited us because we've got to keep it, and a lot of people wouldn't have wanted to bother going and stuff. It's not one of these situations. This is just not what happened there. Right. So in this particular incident here, you've also got to remember that in the London Underground, you've got there was a company called Variant Systems who ran a lot of the cameras. I don't know who runs the cameras now, but a lot of the surveillance in London is done by Israeli companies, and basically I think all of the world's telephone surveillance goes through Israel. So, I mean, it's becoming extremely clear that there's a Jew or an Israeli and Jewish influence in loads and loads and loads of things in people's lives that they just aren't aware of. And because they're so brainwashed, if you say to them, "Well, isn't that a bit suspect?" they'll start like almost crying because they're so scared that you'll think that they're Adolf Hitler or something. You know, it's because they're brainwashed. Yeah. I'm not necessarily slagging Adolf Hitler off, obviously, but you know, I haven't really made my mind up about him. But the point is that again, he got slagged off a bit too much for my liking. That's my thinking about it. Yeah. So it makes it very suspicious. So you've got someone who's universally popular, a go-getter, got things done, and he gets flagged off all the time. Then you've got people who are universally unpopular and incompetent, and no one ever slags them off. You see, this is the thing. It's like, if you understand how Jews work, you realise that this is the thing. It's all about snidey, sneaky, or this is stereotypical behaviour. Snidey, no direct attacks. The total cowards. They'll always go round the sides and try and get a big team against you and bully you, and you wouldn't even necessarily know who had a problem with you. I've come across this with other evil Jews. I'm not saying all Jews are evil, but I've come across some very evil Jews. And now, when I ever see anything that's very evil, I do generally presume Jews are behind it. Now, I always presume Jews are behind it, but I generally can prove that Jews are behind it because it's like a bit like 2 and 2 equals 4. It's like a mathematical equation. Now, especially with all these wars, they're all allegedly benefiting Israel. Now, I'm not sure they're benefiting anybody, to be honest. But, you know, there's a big agenda to get World War III going. And I don't know if you know that Alfred Pike wrote a letter to, I think, Giuseppe Mazzini, explaining what the purpose of the 3 world wars was. And the Third World War was to destroy Israel. So, anybody who thinks it's going to be to make Israel really big and then they're going to be strong forever, that's not the aim of the Third World War. And he quite clearly detailed what the other 2 wars were about before they happened, probably almost 100 years before any of them happened. I don't know, it was a long time ago, maybe 50 years before the First World War, and they happened exactly how he said. So it's all been planned a long time ago, and you know, and he was a very high, I think he was America's highest Freemason at the time, and you know, you can see his letter, you can read it, it does exist, it's not just a made up fantasy. Right, so I don't want to get too confused with terminology here, because again, it's a diversion, and again, Jewish confusion words. They deliberately use words which don't mean anything, so that people look stupid when they use them and become apprehensive about using them, because the more educated about them they get, they realise that they're a sort of a flaky word. Like Jew is a very flaky word. Hasn't existed for that long, but what does it actually mean? You know, it is deliberately confusing. And you know, that's part of the that is part of the plan. That is part of the reason. So you've got to be real. You've got to realise sometimes you're going to say something that might sound ambiguous, but it's as true as it can be, because they're fucking around with the language so that you can't describe things properly. That's one of the big things. Right now, another little thing that links in here, which I'm going to actually do a bit more on in detail. I might actually do a kind of quite in-depth review of it. Is there's this thing called common purpose. Now, common purpose, neuro-linguistic programming, all this type of stuff, it's all to do with these funny little courses that you can get put on, and they're all about like upping other people, sort of in a kind of round the back door network. So, like, say someone in the police would work with someone from the council, but the point is, the policeman, why are they working with someone on the council? The council person should be working with someone. The police shouldn't be influencing people around the chain of command, really, should they? But it's all about that kind of stuff. Now, you can get into this, and again, I don't really want to get into it too much, but when I looked up Dana Skelley, I looked up these various links, and they were all to there was these like meetings she'd been doing about highways management. Now, she is well, at least she, as far as I knew, had an engineering degree. You know, she is an engineer. She was a road engineer, like a civil engineer or something. Yeah, she has got proper qualifications. She didn't do media studies or, like, you know, women's rights or some bollocks like that at university. She did. Well, you know, you never know, because they might have just said, "Oh, right, you're in," boom, and everyone else shut up about it, or you're sacked. But let's just presume she is an engineer, right? So she knows about actual engineering stuff, and she's worked with other engineers for years. So the idea that she would go to a meeting and not mention engineering the whole way through the meeting, I'd say is quite worrying. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, you just don't know how it works these days. Well, I do know how it works these days. You still need to run the roads or the underground or whatever it is. And if you look at some of these minute meeting notes, which I'll put the link up to, they just have absolutely meaningless drivel. So you can read meeting minute. I didn't read them all. I think it's about 25 of them, but I read the very last one that was published. It was just meaningless. The whole thing was meaningless, and it was all going about promoting leaders and publicising things. And if you get good publicity and good awareness, you won't have to worry about this thing. And it's like, what on earth are they talking about? They're meant to be there. They're a public company, yeah. Why aren't they just fixing the roads? You know, their remit. Look, if you get someone to build you a loft conversion, yeah, and they're completely employed by you because they're an inside, you know, they're not a private company you've got in. They all they exist is to do is to make you that loft conversion, and then that or whatever, maintain the loft conversion. You don't want them trying to sell you a load of old bollocks. You just want them to do a good job of doing that. Now, obviously, they've got to try and promote themselves to a point and say, oh, well, what about this thing? What about that thing? What about the other? That's fine. But they should not be having meetings about a very, very busy road network and, rail network, probably one of the most strained networks in the whole world. They shouldn't be talking about all that rubbish. But that's what it was all about. And they had the audacity to put minutes of these meetings up and then circulate them around the world. And frankly, it's absolutely outrageous. Right, so, but if you look at that, that's also very interesting. Right now, this is the thing. This Dana Skelley is head of surface transport for London, right? So that's everything that isn't the underground, right? That's the overground trains, the ferries, the bridges, the tunnels, pedestrian bridges, pedestrian tunnels. There's ferry boats that go across the Thames. What else is there? There's like certain pedestrianised areas that TfL run. It's not all of the roads on the network. It's only the ones that, the artery roads, the big A roads. And they've also got loads and loads of cameras for like traffic kind of management. Then they've got congestion charging cameras. They also put all them in. They're in charge of putting them in. So they've got absolutely massive infrastructure she's in charge of. Now that Woolwich Hoax, and I'm not really going to go into the ins and outs of why it's a hoax because it's not the purpose of this video. The point is, it is very clearly a hoax now, and a lot of people are catching on to it. And I think personalising thing has been the secret. And I think Christopher Spivey, chrisspivey.com or chrisspivey.org, has done a fantastic job in lots of what he's done because he's actually named the people who are, walking around in the background. Now, I'm not necessarily saying this lady's bad or good, but the lady was branded one of the angels of Woolwich, this French woman, or at least she was pretending to be French. She's been put in a nut house, right? So she's been medically incarcerated since the hoax started to become more obvious. So obviously she's been blabbermouthing. But you see, so that there are some interesting things happening. Also, Chris Spivey had some problems, and also he's also having other problems, which I don't think he's admitting openly now, but he's obviously been subverted by his own side, by the people who help him with his site. It's becoming very obvious that he is. And they're putting down an audit trail of things that can be provably, demonstrably wrong, whereas up until that point, they were actually doing an excellent job, and they were coming out with excellent comments on his site after he put his articles in, which were all very, very, very good. And then all of a sudden, they started banning everybody all of a sudden. So I think they've been put in there as plants. Right, so you've got this surface transport, whatever it is. I keep forgetting the phrase. All the surface transport, director of surface transport, or whatever it is. That means that when those buses that were involved, if you look at any video of the hoax, like you can look at any buses. Right now, let's just say there wasn't a hoax, just for the sake of it. Let's just say you're looking at the various pictures of it. You'll see buses going down the road, but the road isn't busy. That road is really, really busy. And at that time of day, it'd be really busy. So you've got these buses going down the road, and then stopping when there's not a stop, and then there's no other cars on the road really. In fact, there's none. Now, that means that somebody has to stop the traffic. I'm not saying this. Let's just pretend it wasn't a hoax. Let's pretend everything went just according to plan. Right. So if they've stopped the traffic on that road, and the police arrived, they wouldn't have stopped the traffic on the road and then arrived to the scene of where whatever was going on, would they? You know, they would have. That wouldn't be how it would work. You know, it's quite an effort splitting off a scene, but first of all, you go and see what's going on. You don't try and stop the cars first. Then you've got this bus that was stopping. The buses have cameras on the buses, yeah? And so all of the people who were getting on the bus and off the bus, they would all be on the camera. And also you have to use an Oyster card now. It's virtually impossible not to. It's like a swipe card, which you have to put money on first. So almost all the people on the bus in normal circumstances would have been traceable straight away by these Oyster cards, which TfL again runs. And of course, with it being the buses, you can ask for printouts of stuff, or you used to be able to anyway. There's a big printout and it tells you all the places you've been, and I'm sure they still have them on the buses. So Dana Skelley's in charge of the buses. She's in charge of the cameras on the buses. She's in charge of that bit of road network and the adjoining road that went across, because there's kind of a bridge and then there's a continuation of the bridge and then another A road that goes across that. So she's in charge of both of those things. All of the roads in the TfL network have these multi-directional cameras which have very good zooms on them, and you could literally see somebody's eye colour from like 100 metres away if you zoom in, and you can twist them round. They're in the offices, you can use them, they're there. If the traffic just stopped on its own for some reason, engineers would find out, and they'd be on the thing finding out if the police wanted to know about it. You know, they'd be able to check. This would be the kind of thing that lots of people in TfL would have access to. They'd have these cameras, you can just cycle through them in certain areas or type in a little code and it'll bump onto a certain camera and you can check all this stuff. So this whole Woolwich thing, various aspects of it would have been watched, but it would have been done by TfL surface transport, yeah? So you've got the trains, you've got the buses, you've got the cameras on the buses, you've got the drivers on the buses. You will be able to find out the passengers on the buses unless something very weird happened and they all got on and paid cash. But it's virtually impossible now because they don't let you pay in coins. You've got to pay with notes. So you'd have to sort of pay like £5 just to get on. There'd be anomalies there, but it'd all be provable. You'd be these catalogues of evidence. Now, as we know, some of these people who got on this bus have now been identified and getting off the bus as they seem to be actors, like with the Boston bombing hoax. And some of them have been traced to the military and MI5 and stuff like that. So all of this could all be tracked. Then there's the bus driver. He will be able to be tracked. Now, he didn't go to there's this sham court case. He didn't go to that. He wasn't called as a witness. Now, you'd think he'd be quite important because he was stopping his bus when there wasn't a bus stop, which you can get sacked for if you're a bus driver in England and most countries now. I don't think they always would under certain circumstances, but still, he'd be a key witness because, of course, he's looking down a road which is unimpeded by traffic for some bizarre reason. So he would be a key witness. And you might as well just get all the witness statements you can. I certainly would. What's the harm? Someone's been killed. You're going to mount wars off the back of it and all sorts. You might as well get belt and braces. So he hasn't been. You've got all the witnesses on the bus who are all, I believe, actors, and it seems that some of them have been proved to be actors. You've got the road network. You've got everything, every single thing. The cameras in the road that could be, take pictures of what was going on. Not that they necessarily would, but they would at least know like why all the cars had stopped going down the street. If she has closed off the road and that just didn't come out for some reason or whatever or another, that would still, every single thing in that event is basically got Dana Skelley as the responsible person. She is responsible for all of these things. So I've never heard any link to her whatsoever. Nothing to do with this hoax or to do with the investigation or anything. And it strikes me as very, very, very strange because, it is her network. And I understand it's not the most interesting aspect of it. But the thing is that the amount of evidence that revolves around her is, it's quite catastrophic. And you've got to remember that things like these cameras, no doubt there'll be film footage missing and all that stuff. But these, these videos, these phone videos that were taken of these people who are meant to have attacked this guy, they didn't really cut it. They're not really very good photos, as you can see. They're not really proper smartphones, as from what I would say. But you see, the point is, if you've got like super duper high tech cameras, you'd be able to get the whole thing. They just say, we used TfL's cameras and we had somebody running across the road, or We had the bus driver, had an elevated position, he could see the whole thing. These people who are just wandering about the street aimlessly, it doesn't make any sense. Do you see what I mean? You've actually got a log of all these people who are on the scene, and she is in a central position to all of this. And when you then find out what her background is, and the fact that she's doing the silly things with her hands, which the evil Jews do, and she's doing all this stuff to do with common purpose type talks about leadership and all this stuff, when she should be talking about like perception management and all this, when she should be talking about making the buses run. It's a 100% in my book. I mean, like circumstantially wise, it's massive, but then again, she's literally a pivot on the top of all these different things. She is in charge of all these things. So whether she actually, she's not going to sit there with the cameras herself, probably, is she? But the point is that she would know the person who was doing it. All of these people would all be answerable to her. And I think she's been put in place to manage it. Now, there's another very, very important aspect here which I'd really like you to bear in mind. If you are actually killing somebody in an operation, be it a fake operation or an assassination, the most important thing to remember is it's all about killing them, either leaving them to drop where you killed them with a load of people around so nobody suspects you've got anything to do with it because it's in public, and they just get panicked and start running around and not knowing what's going on, in your way away by the time anyone even thinks to associate you with it, or you've got to get rid of the body, that type of stuff. It's logistics to do with the violence side of it. If it's going to be a hoax, and this, was meant to be a hoax, there's no doubt, what you've got to worry about is things like people who weren't actors getting on the scene. You've got to worry about cars just driving through and mowing people down. Because, you've all seen a taxi driver who can't be bothered to stop when there's an accident and almost run somebody over who's attended to it. I've seen that happen a couple of times. Things like that would be a right pain, a real pain. These would be the key issues in such an operation. So you might think, well, you can't really pin anything on her. Well, actually, you definitely can, because if they're going to close a road off or do anything like that, or sort of do something to sort of obstruct the road, she must have known about it. It will be on her cameras. There will be people saying, right, why is that road stopped? The traffic's flowed. There'll be someone checking it, and that road would be blocked off. So they'd be like, what? They've got cameras on that road. So you've got to realise that it doesn't really matter whether they've got pictures of the two Michaels wandering about, running about, doing funny little jigs and sort of like not getting killed when they get shot with dum-dum bullets and having bulletproof vests on and all that stuff. And, driving headlong into a lamppost, bouncing off it, and then getting out of the car completely fine out of a little dinky car. All that stuff, it's all completely stupid, because all of that stuff, it didn't happen, did it? But the logistics of not letting anyone down that road, it would all be down to Dana Skelley, right? Also, let's say you've got somebody conscientiously watching the cameras, and they're just diddling through. They could have watched that event, and they could have said, no, they were dragging a fake body around. So she would have had to put trusted people in place on that. You see what I mean? So it's more like an exercise in finding out what would normally be something you try and box off. Because if you were doing a brainstorming session, now I know that's kind of a wankerism, but if you were trying to work out what could go wrong, like a hazard operation, what do you call it, a hazard diagram, what could go wrong, the things would be somebody at TfL looking on the cameras, someone at TfL having a recording of the bus camera recording all the people who were on the bus who shouldn't have been on the buses, someone at TfL recording the fact the bus was reversing. I believe it was reversing, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it was. Someone from TfL wondering why the bus stopped way short of the two Michaels, where you probably could say you wouldn't have even known what was going on, and started letting people off, and then started letting people on a bit later. You've got all these different things. Now, I want to tell you one thing that we had a concern with at TfL that we were all told about. It wasn't my job to look at the cameras, but they were just there in the room next to because it was kind of, these offices where you have mirrored floors. The office I was in, there were mirrored floors. So you had the same thing on each floor, virtually the same. And they had these cameras, and they'd have about 2 TVs with cameras and little joysticks, and you could flick through them. And they were saying, look, you've got to remember, don't look at anyone's house. Don't point the camera at someone's house, because you can actually see them moving, and people can look at them, seeing them look at their house. So you can actually look into people's houses. Now, bizarrely, just due to the way angles work, you didn't actually. I never found myself accidentally looking into a house and just diddling around with them because I was having a cup of tea or something. I didn't do that. But the point is, you could have done, and they were told, because when people had these things pointing at their house, they'd often phone up and complain. So these cameras are like really, really good. They're really quite excellent. If you gave a little kid them to play with for a day, they'd be very pleased. They'd be very impressed with them. I can tell you that now, because I was certainly very impressed. And if I had a little kid, I would have been. So that's it, right? It's more about the logistics, your priorities. If you're actually killing someone, it's different. They're not killing somebody, so the logistics are more difficult, but they're different because they've got obviously a fake body. They've got a car that's sort of like been lit. They can't drive the car into a lamppost really, 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 really fast. They can't do that. They cannot get away with doing that, because what's going to happen? The two Michaels will be all splattered all over the bonnet with all their heads smashed in on the glass. So that hasn't happened, yeah? So someone's had to lift that in, and they're going to have to did they get a crane? Did they drag it in? You see? And when you start asking these other questions, it prolongs the amount of time that bit of road would have had to have been shut. I want to think about more things to do with this on a kind of logistical level, but you see, it's only just come to me. I emailed this recruitment agent who wanted me to consider doing a job for TfL the other day. They didn't call it TfL, but it obviously was TfL, because they said all the new bus stops all around the road network of London. So if it's all around the road network of London, it probably would be TfL, I'd imagine. Maybe it isn't. Maybe actually I just thought it could be one of the contractors who does the bus stops for them. But anyway, it looks like TfL. I think. But the point is, and I got back to him and said, oh, no, I won't, because I used to work for Dana, and I was working on a £15 million claim against her, and because I've got this intimate knowledge of her incompetence and how she's been protected for some nefarious reason, obviously, I've just worked out it was to do the Woolwich Hoax. So I sent that email to this girl, and then I put it up in scanning form. It's a bit hard to actually follow if you just don't really understand what's he talking about, because of course it's in an email format, responding to an email about a completely fairly separate matter. But anyway, my name's Tom Carhill. It's Tuesday, the 12th of August, 2014. So that's, Tuesday, the 12th of August, 2014. And my name's Tom Carhill. I'd like to hear your comments. This is an expansive bit of work. As I said, she's obviously in the tribe. She's very evil. There's no question. She's unabashedly evil. She doesn't even try and hide it. She's a proper top-ranking tribesman. Well, not necessarily top-ranking, but she's been elevated. And the thing is that if she doesn't get, well, basically, there's too many linchpins attaching to her, and these will be Freemasonic linchpins as well, because of all the bent contracts on the underground and all the transport system in England. That I don't really think they can have her in place. I just don't think they can, because there's too many things. And with the Woolwich Hoax coming down, largely thanks to Mr. Chris Bibby, she can't stay in place. I just don't think she can. I think they'll have to offer. Now, you might think that's just part cloud talk, right? And I can see why you'd say that. But you see, the point is, if they stick her in a mental asylum like they were Angel of Woolwich, right? They'll have to there'll be other mental Jews, because a lot of them are schizophrenic, as you know. A lot of these Ashkenazi Jews are schizophrenic. These Canaanites, they've got these evil intentions. They're not like normal people, right? So you've got to remember, they're not like most Jews either. That's the thing. They don't just think they're a bit better. They think they're very evil. So they act very weird. Now, if all of a sudden someone goes, right, Dana Skelley's been put in a mental asylum because she's a fucking nutter, people go, oh, we all knew she was a nutter. But then people would start to see a pattern. They go, well, that fucking woman's a nutter, and he's a nutter. And look at that creepy little gove. What's he? He'd be up to something. Let's just bang him in the sex offenders ward and make something up about him. He must have done something. People are going to start thinking like that. And then they're going to say, yeah, but why do they all look the same? I don't know. I don't get what. And then they'll say, oh no, they're all like a kind of in a weird little. They've got like some kind of continuity between them. So I don't think they can stick her in a mental asylum, because I think people will start to see the pattern between, well, basically Canaanites, car-carrying Canaanites, even though they're crypto, aren't they? They don't let people know. I don't think they do anyway. They would want to start putting them all in mental asylums, and of course they do belong in mental asylums, but they don't want to go in mental asylums because they want to take over and kill like 90% of the population, don't they? That's what Agenda 21's all about. So you've got to remember that they can't they can't put them in a mental asylum, because otherwise people will see all these people pushing Agenda 21 and dysgenics, the Liverpool care pathways where they kill the old people and all that. They'll realise they're all Ashkenazi Jews. They'll say, oh, that shipman, he was a bit weird. Oh, he was an Ashkenazi Jew. Oh, Jimmy Savile, what was he? Oh, he's an Ashkenazi Jew who said he was a Catholic. They often say they're Catholics. They can't do it. There's too much tied up in people not knowing that they're Jews. It's very important that people don't know that they're that specific type of Jew. It's very important. The other thing that's very important is that if she's hanging about and you sort of think, well, nothing's going to come of it. Nothing's going to come of it. I think that could be correct. Right? But even if nothing comes of it, there was this guy called Phil Blight, and he ran these suicide plays for the children around the Bridgend area, lots of which who went and committed suicide, showing them the hanging plays. Now, when a guy I know called Tim Rogers went on an obscure radio programme and talked about Phil Blight and how he linked him to these suicide clusters and various other things to do with Agenda 21, which is very important, you need to look up, he was dead hanging the next day. So, they do push their own off the bus if they're a liability. Phil Blight was a liability. He apparently killed himself, whatever. He never killed himself. He was murdered because he became a liability. And I think the other thing is that if you ever see some of these behaviour and you start thinking this is very like somebody I've come across, just remember that it's better for them to get rid of the person who's a problem, as in the person who's been potentially compromised, than you or someone, because the point is that they want to make out that people who notice these things are mental. Now, there's a lot of conditioning, and that's it's a very strong tactic. But like with Eustace Mullins, I mean, as I said, that's why I like the use of the word Canaanite. I know a lot of them think they are Canaanites, so then you've got a bit of mutual ground, and you should always find that wherever you can in any situation. So these Canaanites, they don't want to go after people who quite clearly know exactly what they're up to. Do They don't. They kind of like, for instance, they went for Ernst Zundel, didn't they? They went for Ernst Zundel because he was a bit softly. Whereas if you get someone like that Wickstrom and he just goes, oh, they're Canaanites, they all need to die, they're like, well, they're all extremely evil. They don't really attack him, they just go, he's mental, because it's a more stronger argument. And it's the same with David Cole, that Jewish guy who proved that, went into the Auschwitz Museum and got the director to say that they built the gas chambers, or they extended the gas chambers to have a chimney and various bits and pieces to look like chimneys and stuff after the war. He got almost beaten to death several times, again because he's in the tribe. That's his problem. I don't know what particular denomination of Jew he was, but anyway. So I've been Tom Cahill. It's Tuesday, the 12th of August 2014. I'd really like to know what you think. Again, they're starting wars all over the place now, the Jews are. They fucking love starting wars. It's not on. No one else wants the wars. They start all wars. They always have started all the wars. They're behind absolutely every bad thing in the world. If we don't get them out of power and, seriously restrict their ability to get back into it and vastly increase awareness of their behaviour, and educate people, very soon, I'm absolutely sure Britain will become a paedophile legal country. I mean, that's their big aim. 3 out of those 3 Jewish women who are in Parliament, in the cabinet, in the Labour cabinet, it's the shadow cabinet now. All of them were Jews, right? So, it's a confusing denomination. I don't really get it myself. What is a Jew? I'm possibly part Jew myself. Tim Rogers, he's part Jew. His granddad's a Jew. It's not, it's a bit confusing because you don't want to you don't want to throw the baby out of the bathwater without biting its foreskin off first and sucking the blood. Isn't that what But yeah, this again another sick thing. I didn't know they did it. Couldn't believe it, but they do. So anyway, thanks very much. Bye bye.